Hey, welcome everybody to Vitalpoint Church. As been mentioned, my name is Ron. I'm the lead pastor of Vitalpoint Church. I am so glad you are here. Happy New Year to everyone, especially if you're back from Christmas, maybe new to Vitalpoint Church. So thankful you're here. And also shout out to Grand Bend, our fifth location. This month, launching weekly gatherings. Look out. So exciting. All the work that we've been doing for the last number of months, laying down the groundwork and the foundation, and now we start weekly gatherings. Fired up for what's happening in Grand Bend. If you know people in the area, not connected to a church, tell them about it. Vital Point Church is there. All right, so this is our first Sunday of 2026, which means we get to talk about our word of the year. Now, before I get to it, before I tell you what it is, I need to give you the background to how we got here. Sometimes people ask us, how does this word come about? Where does it come from? Well, let me share it with you. It comes out of my own personal journey of this past year of 2025. So in the summer, I was experiencing God in a very unusual way. It was very quiet and silent. Normally, I have an awareness of God's whispers and nudges, and the Lord really does these things in my life. But for whatever reason, He was so quiet. And I was going crazy with this. I was like, God, where are you? It felt like a game of hide and seek and just was wondering where He was. So during the course of this time, and maybe you've experienced this too, is that during the course of time, there was this one word that kept coming to me over and over and over. And I'm a bit slow on the uptake in this. And then I realized, actually, God is actually whispering and nudging. It's this one particular word. I talked to my wife about this, and believe it or not, she had the exact same word. We both said it to each other at the same time. It was this crazy moment that we experienced. So as we go through the year and as we get closer to the end of 2025, a few months before the end, I'm like, okay, God, what is our word? And I started realizing that was this word that I was getting in the summer, our word for 2026. So I took it to the team, our pastoral team and our leadership team. And I said, hey, like, what do you think? And everybody jumped on board with it. Now, full transparency, this word, I wasn't too keen on it for our church because the word's connected to some struggle and some difficulty and some things like that. And so I was like, okay, but the team and I, we prayed about it and we recognized, yeah, this word is for 2026. And so let me give you what the word is. If we can do a little drum roll wherever you're watching and listening. For 2026, our word is steadfast. That's right, steadfast. A word that carries with it this idea of staying power and strength to stand. What I want to do for the next few minutes is I want to unpack our base text from the Bible that we're going to use to help us with this idea of steadfast. And as I unpack this, I'm going to relate it to our church as well. Let me read for you these verses from Lamentations chapter 3, verses 21 through 24. They are powerful words. Starts with this. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. Those are beautiful verses. Some of you might be familiar with them, some of us not, but they are fantastic verses for us that we're going to extract some truth from today. Now, as I studied these verses, and studied this section dropped right in the middle of Lamentations chapter 3, scholars are debate on this, and there's some confusion around, obviously, the author's Jeremiah. There's already familiarity with that, but there's weirdness in this chapter of I and we and third person, and the first few verses, like the first 20 verses, are full of anguish and lament. People are confused. Is it Jeremiah? Is it God's people? What is it? Is it God doing these things? Is it other people? But I don't want us to get lost in this, because what happens for Jeremiah in verse 21 is he very strategically calls to mind these things. And I think that that's a beautiful recognition of something very powerful, that no matter what the anguish or the lament is, he calls to mind these particular truths. And in calling to mind these things, it brings great hope. It's almost as if he's having an argument with himself. He's got this experience of things that are going on and lament and anguish, but then this other side of him calls to mind these things that help him. Now, we could stop for a second and we recognize that the mind is a powerful thing, isn't it? It's a driving force in all of us. Our mind is not our brain. It's very different. In our minds, we can move towards freedom and renewal, or we can find discouragement, distress, and despair in our minds. This is why Jesus would say that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our mind. The Apostle Paul would write this in one of his letters called Romans. He would say that we bring about transformation by the renewal of our minds. See, we must understand that the impact of our minds has a day-to-day impact. That what goes on between our ears engages the day-to-day experiences. Since many of us have made some New Year's resolutions, maybe gym is one of those things. Now, in gym world, it depends on the gym experience that you have. Sometimes in the gym, it can take you to the edge of your existence in the workout. But what helps you push through that is the mindset. Let me give you an example of this. For example, for me, the rower is a place where I panic. I come unglued when I'm on a rower. My feet get strapped in. If I do not have my mind right before I sit down, I can be guaranteed at some point in the middle of a row, I'm going to have a panic. But I call to mind things that I have done in the past on the rower that allows me to avoid that. What is so cool here is that Jeremiah calls to mind. He's battling against the lament and the anguish. He's doing a shift in his mind, and right away he acknowledges it brings hope to his life. This hope is not based on anything of himself, but what comes out of the next few verses, which is based on the quality and quantity of the things that he's calling to mind. We see this in verse 22 and verse 23. These three things: the steadfast love of the Lord that never ceases, his mercies that never come to an end, they're new every morning, and great is your faithfulness. These three things are based on the character of God: the faithfulness, the mercy, and the steadfast love. What is he doing here? He's not simply just drawing abstract ideas about God. He's letting himself know that the depth of his hope is not based on the things around him, but is based on the active presence of God outweighing his circumstances. This is what he's calling to mind. The first 20 verses is described like life is coming apart. The reality of this is his life is unfolding. And his mercies meet him every morning, and the faithfulness of God is available to him. The quality and the quantity of his hope is based on who God is. Some of us need to hear this. Some of us are thinking that we stepped into 2026, therefore the problems of 2025 are gone. The difficult situations, the circumstances, we think, good, I got a new year ahead, new opportunities. And yes, that may be true, but I don't want to burst your bubble. Those things are probably going to come with you into 2026 as well. But you can call to mind these three things and rise above the circumstances or move through them with purposeful action with your mind. This is an important step for us, an important action step. It's a forward-thinking thing that Jeremiah is doing here. I call to mind, therefore I hope. And he talks about the steadfast love, the mercy, and the great faithfulness. Now, obviously, we're not going to look at the other two because we want to talk about the steadfast love of the Lord that never ceases. That's our word. So let's spend some time looking at this because there is incredible truth here for us, and then I'm going to apply it to us as a church. The phrase, steadfast love of the Lord, is one of the most dense theological terms that describes the love of God in the entire body, in the entire Bible, okay? We cannot allow ourselves to adopt the world's thinking on the word love here. See, the world's idea of love is more of a sentimental affection of accepting and affirming everything. It's much deeper and much richer than this. There's an expansive meaning. It's thick. There's layers upon layers. Matter of fact, this idea of the steadfast love of the Lord carries with it this dynamic of the covenant loyalty. That's another aspect of it. The promise of God's part in our relationship, or a faithful commitment. He's never going to let us down. or there's a relentless mercy, withholding at times what we deserve, or this love that acts towards us that's undeserved, always moving towards us. This is the dynamic and the depth of the steadfast love that we're talking about. So it's not just a love of affection or kind of a love that we use in our everyday conversations, but there's a theological density to it that allows us to see the richness of it. But what he says is it never ceases. It never comes to an end. He recognizes that even though the struggles are real, and some of the description is like grinding his teeth on gravel, that's a really bad scenario for us when you think about it. But he says this love, you never come to the end of it. You never come to the bottom of it. And this isn't just something that God does to his people. It's the character of who God is. So the steadfast love, it never ceases. So it never runs out. It never fails. It never gets tired. It never gets bored. You never get to the bottom of the bucket of the steadfast love of God and go, oh my, there's none left. It's always there. It's always steadfast. And I think about this, just a kind of side note before we apply this to us as a church is, the example of this is Jesus himself. When you read about his life or you hear about the stories of his life, you begin to recognize that he demonstrated this towards people. How the steadfast love would speak into people, call them to repentance and call them to transformation because of the depth of his love for them. And the greatest example of this love is his willingness to lay down his life on the cross. A willingness to go to the cross to pay our price of our sin debt that we could not pay on our own. What an incredible example of love. And then rise 3 days later and to know that we can't outrun or exhaust this kind of love because it's found in a person. Now, when I think about this and I begin to assess this and realize how it applies to our church, I want to put a phrase on the screen for us, and it's this. The steadfast love of 2026 is a year of standing strong because his steadfast love never ceases. Can I say that again for us? A year of standing strong. There's a sturdiness to us. There's an unmovable part of who we are. Nothing can knock us off of the steadfast love that never ceases from the Lord. Now, this moves me to a place where I recognize that it's an important thing. As I look forward into 2026, I begin realizing how important this is because as we step into this new year, we're going to be faced with challenges. Challenges are going to come our way. Our kingdom assignment of planting 10 sites by 2035, which means we've got 5 more to plant. And this year, we're going to start praying about where does site number 6 go. It's a challenge that's before us. Over the next year, we've got to begin to examine again the structure of our staff and making some of those changes that focus towards the right places so that we are strong as we move into the future. We have the challenge of raising up new leaders that will stand in roles and responsibilities that will move them out of the comfort and convenience of their lives, asking them to sacrifice, asking them to step into moments of leadership. Because what happens in a church like Vitalpoint, the challenge is enough leaders. Who will be those next leaders, those next generation leaders? Some are right now being raised up in our family ministry and children's ministry on Sunday mornings that will go through our student ministries, and then they become fantastic leaders in our community. I love what Ephesians 4 talks about. Ephesians 4, you can look at it later. It talks about fivefold ministry of the apostolic, prophetic, evangelist, shepherd, and teacher. This is an important piece to who we are as we develop the spiritual gifts. But the cool thing about the challenge of this year and the development and the strengthening of our church is that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. With the challenges, there's going to be opposition. We know that the enemy of what God is trying to do through Vitalpoint Church would love to kill, steal, and destroy. That's his responsibility. That's what he does. Like, he doesn't see it any other way. He tries to kill and steal and destroy, tries to divide and create chaos. And what we're seeing more clearly right now in the opposition of the darkness and the evil one is that he's becoming more readily visible through his actions. And we see this. And this is why when we have prayer events at our church across all of our locations, we call people to prayer. It's why we ask that you come so that we can start praying and seeking God and getting strength in our prayer. Prayer is the heavy lifting that we do and that helps us and stand strong on the opposition that comes our way. And because here's the thing, that when we go to new towns and new places, the enemy doesn't roll out the red carpet and say, welcome, so glad you're here. You mean to tell me that the good news of Jesus Christ is going to bring transformation to families and individuals? Sure, come on in. No, the enemy would love to stand in opposition and even rise up within the church itself. And so we know that the opposition is coming. What is so great is that we get to stand in the steadfast love that never ceases. But then also this 2026, I think what's interesting is that there's going to be opportunities that come our way. There's going to be opportunities that come our way, but I want us to be careful that they don't become a distraction to what God has called us to do. See, in church world, there's always new methods and ideas and shiny new objects that the churches can do. But what happens if you begin to just embrace them all, it dilutes the power of what God wants to do in and through our church. And so we want to stay clear in who we are called to be and what we are to do, and creating spaces for people to explore in their journey of life and faith, and helping people grow and be discipled in their faith. To be quite honest with you, I wish that what my dream is, my prayer is that we would continue to remain simple as a church and not become too cluttered and distracted. See, our passion is to keep our eyes focused upward towards the things of God, so that we not be distracted by other things, because of the steadfast love of the Lord. It never ceases. So as I think about the year ahead of 2026, I can see the challenges that are going to be in front of us. I can see how there's going to be opposition. I can see how there's going to be opportunities, but we stand steadfast in the things that God has called us to. Why? Because of his steadfast love that never ceases. Now, I want to give you 4 things that I believe will help us. I'm going to call them pillars, 4 pillars that are going to help prop up the steadfastness and what they're going to do for us as we move forward. And as I go through these 4 things, I really hope that they apply to your life as well as an individual, because I think they're going to be helpful for you as you move through 2026, but also for us as a church. So let me give you these 4 pillars as I think about as steadfastness becomes part of who we are. The first pillar is confidence. Confidence. The author of Lamentations shows us that when the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, it's not a self-assured arrogance of confidence. It is a confidence in God, attaching ourselves to him. What I want you to think about is that when we think about the future of VPC, when we think of 10 sites by 2035, now it might be more, it might be less, but what we have confidence in is that the future is in God's hands, that the Lord knows and sees and understands and sees our desired future. So we simply walk in the confidence that he knows what our future is. And so we take those steps towards that with a confidence, not with a timidity, but with a confidence and a power that is available to us. So we step with this humble confidence. Pillar number 2, that was pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is the assurance. What does Jeremiah say? That there's great, he says, great is your faithfulness. That's verse 23. He doesn't just say, God, you're faithful. No, he says the assurance is great is your faithfulness. There's an expansiveness of it. There's a legitimacy to it. See, even though the plans that we have before us in this next year, we don't know fully how they're going to unfold, but we have the assurance of its faithfulness. We have the assurance that God is fine-tuning our church as we step towards the future. I think about his great faithfulness over the past 11 years. Think about who we've become as a church and how God has been reshaping us, and the assurance of fine-tuning and bring us to the completion that he sees in us as we move forward. How powerful it is to know that God has provided in the past, and how perfectly he will provide in the future. We have the assurance, which leads me to pillar number 3, which is trusting. I love what Jeremiah says, therefore I hope. I call to my mind, therefore I hope. What he's saying is that I have a clear trust in the one who knows the future. See, there's going to be times in this year where maybe we go through some valleys. We go through some difficult moments as a church, but we cannot despair. We cannot be discouraged. We can trust in the promise of, of how God is going to walk with us in those seasons. I love Psalm 23. It's often read at funerals that when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, as we move through those things, he is present. We can trust him that he is faithful and his perfect timing is a result of who he sees us becoming into the future. So we have that trusting aspect of it. I believe that with this kingdom assignment that we have, that God is going to bring the right people. Remember I talked about leadership earlier? That God is going to raise up within the context of our church, people who will step into leadership roles, that he's going to give us eyes to see and ears to hear those people, those leaders. I also believe that the resources of like money that is available to us because of the kingdom assignment that God is going to bring to us. And just a side note, I haven't verbalized this too much. I've been praying about this over, and this comes in the pillar of trusting, is this idea that God has kind of placed in me, I believe, is that the resources that are available to begin to train, not the greenhouse, that's going to continue to develop younger people in our context, but a greenhouse expansion of raising resources to actually develop planters, church planters that we can send off, and the money to be raised for that outside of Vital Point Church. I believe God is going to lead us in that direction. We're going to trust him in the steadfast love that never ceases. The last one, it's kind of building. Pillar number 4 is a boldness. A boldness. Because of the steadfast love of the Lord that never ceases, we can walk in obedient, humble boldness, knowing that God is using our church for whatever reason, for his purposes. I've been pondering this a little bit as I've been thinking about the future. I don't want to be a church that passively stands by watching and waiting for God to move. What I want to do is I want to commit our ways to him, acknowledge him, and as we move, he makes our path straight so we can walk with a boldness into the future. See, there's a difference between sitting on your couch with your feet up, waiting for God to provide you a job, and the difference in going out and searching and applying and believing that God is going to provide you a job. Do you see the difference in those two things? One is this passive sit back, put your feet up. And the other one is boldly moving forward, knowing that God is going to provide. When I think about site number 6, right around the corner, we cast this vision a few years ago for site number 6 by 2027. This means that this year coming, we're going to be boldly stepping forward. We're going to not just passively wait for towns to kind of emerge. We're going to start praying specifically for towns and then begin to strategically raise awareness in those places. And that's a boldness. That's not just sitting back going, God, we kind of hope one day just, no, we're going to boldly with courage step forward like Joshua did when he crossed the Jordan River into the promised land. When God asked him to lead his people to the promised land, be strong and courageous, be bold. See, here's the thing. Our kingdom assignment is way too important to not step forward, to not allow the steadfastness to be who we are, to have confidence, assurance, and trusting and boldness to step forward into these communities and places and neighborhoods where the hope of Jesus needs to be spoken about. So this year, as you think about the year ahead, 2026, as you think about this word steadfast, as you think about one church with many locations, what I think about is a people that will call a truth to mind, anchored in the steadfast love of the Lord. What I see is a people that walk with confidence and humility, assured, trusting, and bold as we take steps towards this new year ahead of us. Not based on our own determined steadfastness, but saturated in the steadfast love of the one who never ceases. Vital Point Church, we stand strong because his steadfast love never ceases. And so for today, Vital Point Church, may we be steadfast. And maybe today you're here for the first time since Christmas and you're like, dude, you need to settle down. Like, you're going after it. And I'm like, yeah, I am. But here's the thing. What is so incredible, and I want you to hear this, if maybe you're not a follower of Jesus yet, today you can surrender your life to Jesus. You can become part of something bigger than yourself, because here's the thing. We don't want to make you a churchgoer. We want you to become part of the church and to become part of something bigger than yourself, and that is seeing God bring renewal to individuals, families, towns, neighborhoods where God is powerfully working in and through us as a church. Or maybe, just maybe, some of us are bored in our faith because we've journeyed enough through faith, and you've heard so many sermons on these things, so many talks, so many messages, and you realize that church is more than just the hour. You recognize that it's on mission to bring the message of Jesus. So would you be steadfast as well as we move forward into the future? Because here's the thing. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, and it's a love that restores and makes all things new. 2026, our word is steadfast.